leading into a Sunday game. That's what it's going to be for the Fridays going forward when the regular season kicks in. But here in the preseason, it's a day after an Eagles game. Preseason loss to the Steelers last night. Yeah, we know they lost. The final score is pretty irrelevant. How did the Eagles play? John and I have been giving you our thoughts on it. We're going to get our buddy Michael Kaye from NJ.com to give us his thoughts on it. All right, Kaye, what you're a little dark there. What's it say on the hat?
It's Roswell Films. If you know the Foo Fighters, it's Dave Grohl's production company.
Okay.
Since John wants me to wake up after I went to sleep.
Yeah, I gotta wake up, so I got to drag other people with me, Mike. And who better to drag than Mike Kaye?
And John and I are good friends, so I'll do anything for him. But I won't do my hair this early.
Yeah.
No, the reason I ask about the hat is it's better than the Yankee hat that Devonta Smith had on last night during the game. That probably didn't score any points with the Philly fans.
Oh, we're doing that already?
Yeah. Oh, why not?
I'm not.
Right off the bat.
That's an iconic logo. He can
listen. That logo is something that's just become a fashion forward brand. I don't know.
Allen Iverson did it for years. Devonta Smith can do it. If you're great, you can get away with it. It's a matter if you're not great, then they might start to notice. But I do want to shift gears, and thanks for jumping on, Mike, and read Mike at NJ.com. Obviously, you had your interesting thoughts on the game. But I want to start with Jalen Hurts, obviously. I think it's ironic that they treat him like a starter, but they won't name him the starter. And last night, it was a perfect example of, again, we've been at every training camp practice. He's taken every first-team rep. He plays 2 series. They treat him like a starter. That's fine. Have no issue. Why not name him the starter? What are we waiting for?
He's like a girlfriend that you date for 10 years and never propose to. It's like a weird – they've kind of given him the cold shoulder as far as I'm concerned. This is – whether he accepts that being a cold shoulder or not is kind of irrelevant. But actions speak louder than words. I wrote this after the draft that them drafting Devonta Smith spoke to their understanding of what the quarterback situation was. We hear all these Deshaun Watson rumors. John, you and I have talked about it several times. We've both reported it. Those are definitely legitimate. And so he's going to continue to be the starter until he's not. And Nick Sirianni doesn't want to put his foot in his mouth, declare his starter, and then all of a sudden stuff changes. Deshaun Watson's legal situation's figured out. Everything goes forward. He doesn't want to lie to the locker room. He's building that trust in the locker room. And we saw towards the end of Doug Peterson's tenure that once you lose the locker room, it's it just plateaus. So I think Sirianni's choosing his words wisely. I don't disagree with what he's doing just from the standpoint of everything that's going on around him and all the variables. But yeah, it does kind of feel like the organization is giving Jalen Hurts a cold shoulder when all this kid does is keep a positive attitude. I thought he came off very, very well in his post-game press conference. Seems like he understands what he does wrong and then what he needs to correct. Will he correct those things? That remains to be seen.
He handles it quite well. I agree with you there. You mentioned how Sirianni is playing in the locker room. How do you think Jalen's teammates look at this? Certainly the veteran guys understand there's a lot that goes into roster building and declarations by the coach and stances by the organization. Rookies are just too busy fighting to make the team and establish themselves in the National Football League. But guys like Lane Johnson, who have been here before, and Brandon Brooks and Fletcher Cox, any of them surprised and or ticked off at the way the organization is handling Jalen Hurts, you think?
No, they've been around. They know how this organization works. But I think when you have guys who came in with Jalen, younger guys who have gravitated towards him, especially last season, you notice that he really had a hold of the locker room even when Carson Wentz was the starter. So I think those guys want to fight for Jalen. I think they want him to be the starting quarterback. I think they want to make plays for him because they have that relationship. Jalen's gone out of his way to make relationships with everyone, basically, is what he said yesterday. And, you see it. Quez Watkins gets the screen pass for a touchdown with Joe Flacco at quarterback. The first guy that goes over and celebrates with him, Jalen Hurts. Jason Huntley, we've been in training camp practice. The dude will have a big run, and Jalen Hurts will come all the way over from the offensive sideline and celebrate with him. He's celebrating with the third or fourth string running back. So I think Jalen Hurts is I don't think it's political, but I think Jalen Hurts has kind of won the election running unopposed or against the rumors within that locker room.
Before you jumped on, Mike, Jody and I were talking a little bit about pedigree, and I want to talk about two of those young receivers. And you mentioned one of them, Quez Watkins, but also Jalen Reagor. I think we all know Jalen's going to play. There's no question about that. I do think from the foundation, from the day he got here, one of the foundational pillars of Nick Sirianni was competition. Quez Watkins still has a lot of work to do. Nothing's finished. But he's put himself in the conversation to be in this group of receivers. Is that fair to say at this point?
Absolutely. I think, if anything, Travis Fulgham's the guy that suffers here. I think you can move Reagor into the slot and be very comfortable and run a look where it's, Devontae Smith, who they say they're comfortable running him at X, Reagor in the slot, and Quez Watkins at the Z spot. Because right now, Travis Fulgham's dropped a lot of passes, which is very concerning. He didn't get targeted last night. It's been up and down for him. He's made some plays, but it's been lackluster. And so I think when you look at a guy like Quez Watkins, the first guy who's going to take a hit is Travis Fulgham. It's not going to be Jalen Reagor. I think they see something in Reagor. I think they're willing to go through the mud of all of the inconsistencies and have him play. I think he'd actually be better in the slot. We saw him dominate on slant routes last year in training camp, and then they really didn't ever put him in the slot. So I think, Quez Watkins is definitely in the discussion. He's been in the top 4 wide receiver discussion from the jump. Now it's a matter of, hey, is he going to get 20 to 30 snaps a game?
Michael, well, let's talk about pedigree at the running back spot, because it was a bit of a surprise last night that Miles Sanders was the only regular who wasn't injured, who didn't play, never got off the bench, get the night off. So they went to all of their other running backs, and there really isn't another pedigree running back there. Hundley off the scrap heap, Gainwell, day 3 pick, Kerryon Johnson, inexpensive, and comes in and says, yeah, I'll even take less. And then you got Jordan Howard on the comeback. They don't really have pedigree there. Do you think that's why Sirianni made the decision to not play Miles Sanders last night? Because he really does have to decide who his other running backs are, because he can't go by the pedigree chart. He's got to play Jalen Reagor because he's a second-round pick. He's got to play, and running backs are basically all starting from the same point. Is that why we didn't see Miles Sanders last night?
Jody, I think that's I think that's part of it, but I also think the fact that we've seen Miles Sanders be injured in his past 2 training camps played a large factor in it as well. You don't want to go into the season with your top stallion on the sideline. I think they know how big Miles Sanders will be for this offense, and frankly, the risk isn't worth the reward. He's played, he's played in the league. He knows what he's doing. He's looked good in training camp. I don't really think, especially from a running back standpoint, I think when you have a number 1 running back and even a number 2 running back, they don't really need that much of a load. I mean, I think Boston Scott got 1 carry. Jordan Howard had the 1 carry for 3 yards, and then that insane blitz pickup where he threw that Steelers DB into another planet. But, I mean, look, they've got to figure out what this rotation is going to be. Boston Scott's definitely going to be part of it. It looks like Jordan Howard is one-upping Kerryon Johnson, which was a little surprising to see on the initial depth chart. But after watching last night's game, you totally get it as to why he's kind of in that conversation. And then Jason Huntley, up and down performance, had a bad drop, bobbled another pass, but also had a really nice kick return. So they had to figure out what that, what was going on there. Elijah Holyfield is, a non-existent, but I know there are people that rooting for him, but yeah, that ain't going to happen. So yeah, I do think they had to experiment and see what they had at running back, but they also didn't give any of those guys a lot of time or a lot of touches. So it's interesting to see how they'll evaluate the process. It seemed like they wanted to give them a lot of pass blocking reps.
Yeah. By the way, Elijah is a good person for the kids to emulate. That guy hustles, bursts every drill, does everything right. You get to stick around as sort of on the periphery of things, but he's not going to be relevant. Mike's right as far as making this roster. I do want to talk about the coaching staff as a whole, because one of the positives for me coming out of that game, Mike, was the fact that we've all talked about the small practices, the 70-minute practices. You know, how much could they possibly be preparing? Are they preparing enough? I thought the most positive thing out of a preseason week 1 game with a rookie head coach, everything was clean early. Everything was pretty clean early. No hiccups, no real mental errors. It looked like the communication went well. Any issues with the logistics of the young coaching staff?
No, they were efficient. They got points on the first drive. It seemed like everybody knew their responsibilities with those starters and second team groups. There were no penalties, I think, until like late in the second quarter. So it was a nice, like you said, it was a clean showing initially. I mean, it's kind of hard when you have starters that are playing 1 series or 2 series or even 3 series to kind of find that rhythm. But it did kind of feel like they were polished. I know it's the preseason. I know that the defense is playing against a backup quarterback, but it did seem like they were just very efficient. The starting defense in their 1 series looked as dominant as it had during training camp. The offense moved the ball relatively well. I know there were 2 really brutal drops by Jalen Reagor and Zach Ertz, but otherwise, I thought Jalen Hurts looked accurate. And I'm sure he wants that go route throw to Quez Watkins back. But otherwise, I mean, if those drops don't happen, we're talking a completely different completion ratio of, I think it's like 5 of 7.
Yeah.
5 or 7.
Yeah, 5 of 7 for whatever. But like, I do think that Jalen Hurts performed a lot better than I expected him to, if that makes sense. Like he looked very efficient. The offense looked efficient. The defense looked very good. And I think that speaks to the way they were prepared. We constantly got on Doug Peterson for them not taking advantage of the first drive or the opening drive. This offense looked like they could actually get down the field. I know it was, 2 or 3 plays, but still, it looked like they were in a rhythm, so to speak.
Mike, I got a coaching question for you as well, and it may have even been touched on in the post-game media availability. If it was, please tell me if I missed it. Was speculated on the broadcast last night, and oh, by the way, I agreed with Ross Tucker. At some point in the second half, it looked like Shane Steichen was calling the plays, that both he and Nick Sirianni were on the headsets. They both had their laminated charts in front of their face so as to not give anything away. And we know that Steichen is going to be sending the plays in to the quarterback, but it's supposed to be Sirianni making the calls. It looked like in the second half that he may have given that responsibility to Steichen. Did anybody ask either of the 2 coaches about it after the game?
We didn't, just because it's kind of hard to see that on the sideline from the press box. But Sirianni earlier this week said that, Todd Haley and Mike McCoy used to let him call plays in the preseason. So it wouldn't be shocking if he let Steichen take a turn. Maybe he lets Brian Johnson take a turn down the road. But that's pretty common in the NFL. Andy Reid used to do it all the time in the preseason. I'm sure he still does in Kansas City with Eric Bieniemy. So I don't think it's that alarming. But, I think Steichen's a guy who actually has experience calling plays. So it wasn't like it was that big of a deal if they did transition over. That said, the 3rd-team offense was pretty terrible.
I wouldn't use the word alarming, but the only thing that kind of grabbed my attention was this is the first time Nick ever called plays. If he's in his 3rd year and he said, Steichen, go ahead, take the second half. Okay, I get it. But this is the first time he's ever called plays as the head coach. He's already passing the baton by the second half.
Yeah, he's got the opportunity in the past, though. Then that's what Frank Reich and Mike McCoy, as Mike said, and Also, Todd Haley gave him that opportunity. So I don't know. Mike's right. We can't see that from the press box.
Right. That's why I brought it up, because you guys are at a disadvantage. I'm just watching on my TV, and I thought it was a pretty good point.
Other people have done it for them, so maybe he would like to do it for his guys as well. But that's just speculation. I do want to shift to the defensive side of the ball, Mike, and Jonathan Gannon. We've seen a lot of multiple looks in practice. We didn't see anything. I don't think it's any surprise. It was very vanilla. But that first team group looked pretty darn good. And I know you mentioned in your column Javon Hargrave. I was impressed with Alex Singleton, who obviously missed a lot of time with COVID early in camp. How good do you think this group can be?
I think they can be really good, but they have to figure out that Sam linebacker role. Right now, it's like a hybrid position that they've got three guys who should be on the fringe of the roster playing at. Right. They've got, Jannard Avery sideline, so Joe Osman started. He did all right. I mean, and then they had Patrick Johnson go in there, and I was actually impressed by him. I hadn't noticed him in training camp at all, and I thought he had a couple of really good series and then got injured and had to leave. But they have to figure out the way to use that same linebacker role. I speculate that Ryan Kerrigan will eventually have that role. Makes a lot of sense. But as far as running a very vanilla 4-3 defense last night, I thought they were very efficient. Again, I think it's about getting to the spots, knowing the field, knowing your teammates, and getting a feel for the defense. We all know that while you can switch stuff up and change numbers and do all this other stuff, defense is defense, and it's about reading and reacting to plays. And I thought they did a very good job with the first team defense last night. I think Javon Hargrave is going to be dominant. When he signed last year, I thought he was the most underrated signing in the entire league. He didn't really make me look good those first 8 weeks when he was kind of coming off an injury and kind of finding his way in a 4-3 defense. But now you're seeing this guy could be really dominant. He and Fletcher Cox could be a really deadly combination. Then you got the defensive ends on the outside doing really well. And Milton Williams last night, tough beat if you're a pro personnel scout who didn't like that pick, because that kid is really good. Reminds me a little bit of Darren Howard, if you remember back in the day. Can move inside and outside, can rush from both, and actually is very disruptive against the run. But I thought that sack that T.Y. McGill got was very largely due to Milton Williams, just heaving Joe Haig to the ground. Joe Haig's a 6-year pro, and Milton Williams, the rookie, made him look ridiculous. So I think, positive signs from the front seven.
Tom Donahue was hoping he didn't make that video didn't get out there at this point. JG was happy with Milton Williams. JG was fired up.
Well, he's a former scout, and he knows what he's doing. So I think listen, I think JG is a guy who, once we see what they're doing, we'll be able to really evaluate thoroughly. I've been very impressed by their practices. I've reached out to a member of the coaching staff just saying, hey, this is one of the most efficient defensive practices I've ever seen. They're very, very good at feeling out plays. I think the secondary is showing its experience for the most part. I actually think Marcus Epps has played relatively well, filling in the role opposite Anthony Harris. I thought Anthony Harris played very well in read and reacting last night. I'm interested to see how these corners do long term. I know a lot of people are blowing smoke that Darius Slay and Steve Nelson are having great camps. I think they're having good camps, but that's still impressive considering Nelson just got here, didn't have an off-season program, is learning the defense. I thought Zach McPherson struggled a little bit more than I thought he would last night, but I think he'll bounce back.
Yeah, quick question on the secondary. Last night, Dwayne Haskins, 16 of 22. Mason Rudolph, 8 of 9. Joshua Dobbs, 5 of 6. Where was the good secondary play? I know it's been in practice is one thing. I didn't see it last night.
Yeah, I think Mason Rudolph did most of that stuff against the second team. The first team defense was on the field for one series, and they couldn't move the ball and force them to punt almost immediately.
Right. So we didn't see anything. We didn't see anything good. We didn't see anything bad. We didn't see anything.
Right. I'm going off basically what I've seen from training camp. But again, I think, the second team and third team defense is not great, not terrific. Still, they took a 6-2 13-7 lead to halftime, and then the 13 group got ripped apart by a former first-round pick. So, like, I mean, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where Josh Dobbs had a freaking horrendous interception. Elijah Riley was like the one guy who could pull out a highlight there. But yeah, the second and 13 defense, that's concerning. I mean, look, they struggled to tackle. They didn't really do very well on the boundaries. But I think something that we should take away is a lot of players kind of bounce back after bad plays. We saw Michael Jacquet get beat down the sideline for 30 yards. He comes back and reads an end around and drops a guy for a loss of 2. Joe Osman had like a bad missed tackle, came back and got a stop. I think that's kind of the mentality this team is taking, and it wasn't something that we saw a lot with the Eagles of the previous 2 seasons, where it seemed like bad plays kind of haunted them for large stretches. So we'll see. Look, it's one preseason game. It's very hard to evaluate all that stuff, but I like what I saw, at least from the perseverance standpoint, from the efficiency standpoint.
You brought up an interesting name to me in Marcus Epps, because I think he's got a natural instincts as a single high safety. I don't know how much single high they're going to play. More cover 2, more cover 3. I think Kayvon Wallace was obviously there, and they hope Rodney McLeod is ready week 1. I mean, that's ultimately the plan. But if it is Kayvon Wallace or Marcus Epps, I think Epps has been better. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think Wallace is more of a box safety that they're using in a role where he's going to play cover 2. I think he can play cover 2, and that's fine. But I think Marcus Epps has done better in coverage for sure, at least from my standpoint in training camp. He's a guy that they really like. He's an analytics darling, as they brought up on the broadcast last night. You know, he's got the speed, he's got the size, and they seem to like him. I know he was a big Tim Houck fan, or a big Tim Houck favorite. So, you know, maybe there's something to that.
All right, Mike, if Zach Ertz's value across the league, what the rest of the league thought of him going into last night's game was X. After last night's game, is it X plus? Is it X minus? Or is it still the same exact X it was before the game?
I think it's still the same. I mean, look, I think you're going to see ups and downs from him. I don't think he's the same player that he was 3 years ago, for sure. I also think, you know, look, there's a mental block there. And I think, look, he's going to have bad days. He's going to have good days. I think he's had a really good training camp thus far. That said, that drop is brutal. And you can't ignore that. He came back, made a nice catch on the next series, but, you know, that could be the difference between 3 and 7 points. So I think when you're evaluating Ertz, I think you realize, yeah, he's gotten a lot of, you know, work. And I think eventually guys break down, although Ertz's game isn't really detrimental from an injury or a wear and tear aspect. He doesn't really go for yak. It's not like he's a very, very consistent blocker. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But yeah, I don't think that he raised his stock or dropped his stock last night. I think this is going to be a feeling out process. I'm starting to think he's going to be here. He led them out of the tunnel last night. The Eagles fans love him. They've opened up money to make his salary cap hit irrelevant. So it's just kind of a matter of, hey, is there an injury somewhere that, you know, opens up a trade? I mean, we just saw last night the Jaguars in the middle of this preseason game traded Joe Schubert to the Steelers. Nobody in the press box kind of knew what was going on from the Steelers standpoint, although some of them were cheering during the game, which was kind of weird. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I want to follow up on Zach, because you mentioned he did lead the team out of the tunnel. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they start on offense. Where do they start, Mike? 12 personnel, Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. If he is here, he's got to play, right? He's just better than the receivers. I mean, you want the speed on the field, obviously. Doug wanted the speed on the field. But these receivers just aren't good enough to take Zach Ertz off the field. Now, obviously, you know, you're going to play 3 receivers, 4 receivers, even 5 receivers at a time in this offense. But Zach's got to play a lot if he's here. Is that do you see it any other way?
No. I mean, look, like you said, the wide receivers aren't ready. And so you don't know what you have in Devontae Smith as much as you liked him as a prospect. And I think at least early on, you're going to have to run a lot of 12, which is kind of a shame because this offense you can tell this offense really wants to be an 11 personnel team. And so, when that conflicts, when the personnel conflicts, the coach has to kind of maneuver around. Doug Peterson did a really good job of that early on. And they were successful. But when you have two mouths to feed like Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz, it's kind of hard to satisfy the middle of the field and then leave the boundaries completely bare. That's part of the reason why the Eagles struggled the last 2 years. You weren't attacking the corners, and so defenses didn't respect you, and you didn't take advantage. So I think that's an issue that can pop up if Zach Ertz is still here.
Mike, how much access are you guys going to have, you, John, all the rest of you beat guys, to the upcoming joint practices between the Patriots and the Eagles? And good speculation, give it. What do you think the Eagles are looking to achieve and accomplish coming out of these practices against a live opposition?
Well, as far as availability, I'm told that I can wear Bill Belichick's hoodie for
nice
20 minutes.
Very good. You're going to ditch the hat. No, you got to keep the hat.
Then I got to pass it to Jimmy Kempski, who I don't think will give it back. But look, we're going to be there for the whole thing. I'm expecting some really quick drills. I think there's going to be some pretty good matchups there. I'm interested to see if Devontae Smith will be out there because I would like to see him go up against Stephon Gilmore. I think both coaches value these as an extra preseason game, and I think they'll handle it as such. I don't think they'll be live at all. I don't think that's what Belichick wants. I definitely don't think that's what the Eagles want. But it'll be interesting to see them face a team that, long term, that's not their own. And I think they need that because, frankly, we've seen Josh Sweat and Derek Barnett dominate camp. But everybody's been like, well, they're just going up against Andre Dillard and Jordan Mailata. Well, now you get to see him against another offensive lineman, another left tackle. I think coverage could benefit from seeing somebody other than Jalen Reagor or Quez Watkins. And so, look, I think this is an evaluation process, but it's also a roster building process. And I think if the Eagles can find some talent on the Patriots roster that might go by the wayside, that could be helpful as well. That's always a possibility. We've seen a lot of player-for-player trades with Howie Roseman in the middle of training camp. Wouldn't be shocked if somebody stayed here after driving here from Boston. So, or I guess New England, whatever. Anyway, so
all right, Mike. NJ.com. Everybody read Mike. I want to thank you for getting up early. I forced you, but you're a young kid. You're up early anyway. You're making all that stuff up. So, last question from me. Who yields more power, the guy with that hoodie, or does Nick Sirianni push back when we're doing the logistics of this practice, or does Bill Belichick just get everything he wants?
Well, no, I think Sirianni's going to be vocal, but yeah, obviously the buck stops with Belichick typically. I mean, that's how it was when I covered the Jaguars and they went up to New England. So maybe the home field advantage makes it a little bit different because Nick Sirianni knows the lay of the land and what they've been doing. But yeah, I don't – it's going to be an interesting style clash because I'm under the impression Belichick likes to take advantage of every second of coaching time that he can, while Sirianni seems to be more on the, hey, let's keep these guys fresh line of thinking. So I guess we'll find out if it's the former, then we know Belichick's in charge. If it's the latter, well, then Nick Sirianni's got to say. But I do think Nick Sirianni will be vocal about what he wants and what he wants to accomplish.
Over under 95 minutes. You going over or under?
Over.
Okay, all right. Then Belichick will be calling the more important shot. Michael, good stuff. Appreciate you coming on board. Thanks, bud.
Thanks for having me.
Michael Kaye from NJ.com.